Welcome. Today, we're not talking about metabolic health. We're not talking about blood sugar. We're not talking about insulin resistance and all these technical things. We're actually going to talk about something that's far, far more important. It's one of my favorite topics, and I have to tell you, it's something that I'm not the best in the world at. It's something I continue to learn. We've got a couple of people in our team that are very, very good at it. It's how you take this information and turn it into the habits that support your health. You know, in this age of social media, and now even the universal or growing access to ChatGPT and artificial intelligence, we're buried in facts. We, in fact, usually have too many facts. And when patients come to us, for example, we see more often a problem where the patient is just overinformed. They've been binging on YouTube. They've been asking ChatGPT. They've been investigating questions about their diet, their health, their exercise, and what to do. And they begin spinning because one thing is there's too many competing opinions, not enough facts and evidence and science. That's where I tend to focus. You know, I was a scientist at Johns Hopkins for many years and ran the program in prevention. So I help focus on looking where the science actually takes us. But again, science only takes us so far. There are many things that aren't known. And even if they are known, having something known and being able to support it with your health behaviors, two very, very different things. So I mentioned that we've got a couple of people that are experts in this area. Debbie Pierce is going to be attending with us today. She's attended with us at least once, I think a couple of times before. And Debbie's background and focus has been in this specific issue, helping us take science and facts and turn them into something that really helps our health. And again, that has to do with habits. How do you create healthy habits? What's the science behind creating healthy habits? How can we change our lifestyle to support what we know once we finally do find it out? So, Debbie, you want to come on board and talk with us a little bit more? Get us started?
Absolutely. Thank you, Dr. Brewer. So it's great to be here. And this is such an important topic because we're talking about something fundamental. And as you mentioned, it's why some people might keep falling off the plan or off track, even when they know exactly what to do. And you've probably seen it more times than me, but we know that people, especially people who come to your clinic, they are not underinformed at all about health. In fact, most of our patients know exactly what to do. They have been following you in YouTube. They know what are the best strategies for their own concerns or goals. However, we still see people who are overwhelmed about feeling stuck and sometimes even caught in this cycle of starting and stopping. And there's people who might relate to this, like, yes, I know what to do, I'm just not doing it. And this is exactly what we want to discuss today, connecting the dots between psychology and physiology and understand why habits fail sometimes or why most people struggle to stick with habits and what we can do about it.
So that's a great place to start. Why don't we just take a few minutes and talk about why habits fail? You know, I've got my plan. I know what I want to do, but it's, you know, when it comes time to get out there and do that workout, when it comes time to change what's in my refrigerator, to not order that grain heavy product or meal, I just make I slip a little bit. Let's talk about why that happens.
Sure. And the truth is that people don't fail due to lack of knowledge or willpower. They actually struggle because new behaviors often conflict with an old identity. And most health advice focuses on what to do, which is the behavior, or pushing the willpower. But if deep down you still see yourself as an unhealthy person or as a sugar addict, there is going to be an internal clash. And psychologists call this cognitive dissonance. That's when you're trying to act like a healthy person while still believing that you're unhealthy. So the inner conflict creates stress, creates inconsistency, and it's like driving with one foot on the gas and one on the brake.
That's a great analogy and description of cognitive dissonance. Driving with one foot on the gas and one foot on the brake. And we see that so often. And I catch myself doing it too. So how does that happen in terms of our brain?
All right. So let's say that you label yourself as a sugar addict and you have been doing that for years. So you try a clean eating plan and toss out all of the junk food. At first, you're going to feel motivated, but soon enough, that old identity, the I just can live without sweets, starts whispering in your ear, and subconsciously, eating healthy feels threatening, threatening to that identity. It's as if your body and your mind rebel because it doesn't feel like you. And this is often a protective mechanism because your brain perceives the radical change as unfamiliar and stressful. So it triggers what we can call as limbic resistance. So the emotional brain resists the new behavior to return to the new or to the comfortable status quo. So the result is that you can find yourself elbow deep in a tub of ice cream before you know it, and then feel defeated afterward. So it's not lack of willpower, is that this external behavior didn't change that internal belief. So when we fail and restart repeatedly, it actually adds to our stress load because every failed attempt can make us feel more guilt and frustration. And that's going to raise stress hormones like cortisol. And ironically, that stress or chronic stress can wreak havoc on our metabolism with elevated cortisol over the time. And that's going to be linked to higher blood sugar and insulin resistance, even poor sleep or more inflammation in the body. So, in other words, repeatedly failing a diet or a workout plan is just a mental blow. It can create a vicious cycle where stress hormones make it even harder for your body to lose weight or even to feel good. So it's no wonder why so many people feel stuck.
Now, I was just on vacation. I did not tell you, though, that I ate ice cream. Was it twice or three times? Now, you may think that I'm going to. How did you know that I found myself elbow deep in a bunch of ice cream? I did enjoy a good bit, but I also felt like I was on vacation, and so the way my brain dealt with, I didn't feel concerned. The way my brain dealt with it is, okay, I've got my boundaries here. And I'm going to eat a little ice cream, but I'm also not going to eat a whole bunch when I get home. So where does all that fit in?
So right there, let's go to that same analogy of I'm a sugar addict. If you identified yourself as a sugar addict and you tasted that ice cream, that's probably going to be an issue if you still identify to these sugar addict person, right? As you already know your boundaries, as you already know that you're on vacation, that you can do it, and there's a healthy relationship with food, that's not creating conflict. However, when you're in that state of conflict, trying to force yourself to do something healthy that you don't yet identify with, your body is going to mount a stress response. So when the brain perceives a mismatch, that's perceived as danger. So you get a flood of stress hormones, and that activates the fight or flight response.
So it sounds like and I don't mean that to turn this into a personal therapy session. Maybe we need to, but if for using me as an example, I've been open that I still eat ice cream. I love it. I just have to watch it in terms of how much I do. And I guess what you're saying is, well, Ford, and I've also often said, yeah, I'm a sweets addict. I've been a sweets addict in the past, but I think what you're saying is, Ford, let's make sure we define addict appropriately. An addict completely loses their boundaries, or they have no boundaries.
No
and
control. Mm-hmm.
and Ford, you do have control. You have a couple of, you didn't eat, you had a couple of servings of ice cream, but you didn't eat ice cream 24/7 when you were on vacation, and you came back off of vacation, you held back, you're not going out and you're not eating tubs of ice cream. So you do have, boundaries, and therefore calling yourself an addict is probably not entirely true. Is that what you would say?
That's right. And you mentioned that at some point you considered yourself a little addict to sweets.
Yes. Well,
And
and I think it's a good point. I think that it is helpful to define addict. When I'm saying it, I'm saying I've loved sweets. I still do. But I also feel very much like I can control
right. I think that's going to be the key. How much I can control
them. Yeah.
of certain behaviors.
So that loss of control is really the key component of addiction.
That's right. And being in control, it's also or can also be linked to when we are stressed, because when we're stressed, the brain loves to just go in autopilot. Okay.
Yeah.
What happens is that the prefrontal cortex, which is the responsible for willpower or planning and self-control, that goes offline. And the more primitive parts of the brain, like the limbic system or the amygdala, those take over. So in a moment of stress or identity dissonance, it literally becomes harder to make logical decisions and easier to default to the old habit. So that's where the brain reverts to what's familiar and rewarding, like reaching for sugar or skipping the gym. So neurologically, stress favors our habitual pathways over the new ones. So that's why it's so important how you identify yourself, because that's going to be your habitual pathways.
Right. So, yes, cortisol, once we get into cognitive dissonance, we impact our limbic system, our fight or flight, our monkey brain, gator brain, whatever you want to call it. Then cortisol gets involved and we go down a bad path. But let's step way back. Let's back it up. It sounds like a lot of the keys here have to do with, number one, we redefined addiction to not having control. And number two, there's a disconnect between, okay, my concept, my self-awareness, my self-definition, my identity is not consistent yet with what I want to be. So I'm making rules, but I'm making rules that I'm not following up on. I'm losing control. So that's where the cognitive dissonance is coming in. I'm saying I want to be healthier, so I want to cut my carbs to 50 a day. But then when then I eat a sandwich and pasta or something. How do I go back and make rules for myself or boundaries for myself that I can follow? And what's the connection here? How do I make rules that I follow, or boundaries?
The missing link to achieve that is to shift your identity. So if we want to change or if we want lasting change, meaning that we're making rules for ourselves that are going to support our specific goals or this type of person that we're trying to embody, we need to address the root cause, which is not lack of knowledge or lack of effort, because usually we know what to do, but it's the internal story that we hold about ourselves. So information alone won't lead to transformation. You can have all the facts and meal plans in the world, but if they clash with your identity, your brain will treat those new habits like a threat. So that's why habits are built in outcomes. Okay, they often fizzle out because they are superficial, and without an identity shift, that change won't feel sustainable or even authentic to us. So the missing link will be identity.
So, so if I were to say, I really don't want to eat ice cream at all, I need to make an identity that says I'm just a person that doesn't eat ice cream. Now, if I were going to make that kind of identity, how do I make
all the facts and meal plans?
I do remain low carb. I usually, I think that's one of the more important things for health for most of us, because like most of us over age 18, I have metabolic disease. In fact, I'm 68 years old. I have full diabetes. I don't beat up on myself because I don't think that, my bad health behaviors have created this. I've never had perfect health behaviors, but I continue to improve. From a science perspective, I'm pretty clear that it's a combination of me, combination of my genetics, and most of all, my age. We're human beings, and human beings get more and more insulin resistance or metabolic disease as we age. So, if I'm coming from a belief system that says, I can maintain my glycemic carbs for the most part 50 or less per day, and I maintain light ketosis about 5 days per week, not so much the other 2 days. I've looked at my plaque in my arteries, and it's good. I mean, it has actually reversed from where it was 10, 15 years ago. And we've got clear evidence demonstrating that. So I'm in a good place. If I were to try to say to myself, I need to be a person who never eats ice cream, and I don't believe that that's necessary, I'm going to start getting into cognitive dissonance. And I'm going to say, well, I told myself I'm not going to eat ice cream. And then on the weekend, I go out and with a family member and say, okay, we're going to eat ice cream. And then I eat ice cream. I start getting into this cognitive dissonance. I start feeling bad about myself. My limbic system takes over. I get emotional. Am I getting that right?
That's exactly it. And we can even think as your identity as the brain's operating system. So those set of beliefs and the self-image that all your habits run on, if you don't upgrade that operating system, any new app that you try to install, that will eventually glitch. So we often try to change what we do without changing who we believe we are. And that backwards. Identity always needs to come first.
So you're saying my identity is the operating system, and the new app would be something like
a habit.
Yeah, a new habit, like a statement of I don't want to ever eat any ice cream at all.
Right.
And that's really not consistent with the identity, the operating system. So I'm going to run into problems.
That's right. And here's a simple example. Let's say that there's a lot of information out there. So I read or I watched in a show that waking up early in the morning and doing exercise is best for your health. Let's say that's a simple example. I can definitely force myself out of bed at 5 a.m. for a few days. but it will feel like torture. Every morning will be a battle between my goal and my self-image, which is saying, this isn't me. I hate mornings. What am I doing? So my nervous system will actually interpret that alarm and workout as a stressor, not a joy. And on the other hand, if I start to adopt the identity of, I'm someone who loves to take care of my body and morning exercise is my time for me, now that behavior is aligned with how I see myself. Suddenly there's going to be less friction because it feels right. And that habit becomes easier to maintain because it's an expression of who I am, not just something that I have on my to-do list. Does that make sense?
I think it does. So to go back in terms of patients, for example, I can see, patients that have had a heart attack and they want to make a change, but then they still struggle to make that change because the internal story really hasn't shifted yet. So where do we go from there?
That's absolutely right. And internally, they still identify as the person who got sick. For instance, they might think, I'm just an unhealthy person or I've never been athletic. Their internal narrative may be one of hopelessness or just a fixed idea of themselves. And if that hasn't shifted, even though they have new medical information, they're always going to identify for that. So, for example, I had a patient who kept referring to himself as a junk food guy. And that was even after a bypass surgery. So he followed the diet we gave him for a few months, but it was almost like he felt he was living someone else's life. Eventually, he drifted back to fast food. In his mind, eating broccoli and fatty fish was something temporary or something that he was doing like a patient following doctor's orders, not really who he was. So his internal story hadn't changed. So the change didn't last. And that's exactly what we're talking about. So when we were identify the root cause of why he was not making progress, and instead of working on the information that he needed, we started to help him change that internal narrative. That's when changes start to work or behaviors start to be coherent with this new identity of someone healthier. So that's what tells us that knowledge alone, it's not enough. We can definitely educate a patient for an hour about their arteries and blood sugar, and they might be very sincere in wanting to change. But if deep down they are carrying an identity of, I'm due to this, or maybe even genetics, all my family had hypertension or insulin resistance, they are going to be in embodying or those beliefs are going to override our advice in moments of stress, because that's where we really need to rely on identity in moments of stress where we are going on autopilot, or maybe when motivation fades. And it's human nature. The internal must align with the external. And as I read it somewhere, they tell like the longest distance in medicine is the 12 inches between the head and the heart. And you really have to change how a person feels about themselves, about their possibilities, not just what they know. And when that internal story shifts, like seeing oneself as a survivor who's getting stronger every day instead of sick heart patient, that's when we see consistent lifestyle changes and healing.
So tell us about the HPA axis.
So the HPA axis is basically um, what will trigger this emotional response, or will translate your emotional response to physiological response. So what that means is if, for example, if you believe that you're healing, that you're embodying that joy and happiness of feeling, your biology is going to start following that identity. So if you feel like you're stuck, that you're doomed, that you will never get better, that's going to raise cortisol. That's going to decrease your neurotransmitters like serotonin, and you're going to start feeling bad. And those feelings are going to lead to a biology shift as well. So we can really change our biology by starting to think, or to change, the way that we think about ourselves.
Well, to that point, for those viewers who are thinking this is getting a little too woo-woo, let me back up and say, gene studies, metabolic studies have demonstrated that beliefs can shift your gene expression through epigenetics. I mean, we've done several videos a few years ago, admittedly, but we talked about the methylome. The methylome is where methyl groups are associated with actual parts of genes. It's like, for those of us in my generation, the boomers, there used to be a thing at the library. You know, you used to go to a library to find books instead of online. And the way you found books was a thing called the card catalog that helped you that showed you how the information was organized. The methylome is the card catalog of our genes, our genetics. And yes, believe it or not, it's been demonstrated. Our own belief systems can end up affecting that card catalog, that methylome, that gene expression. So if you're thinking again that this is soft in terms of science and evidence, you probably should back up and look a little bit harder.
That's right. And this is really underscoring that the mind and the body are deeply connected. And as you mentioned, doctor, there are emerging research on epigenetics, on how our thoughts and environment can also switch our genes on or off. So, for instance, studies that show that practices which shift mindset, like mindfulness, meditation, those can alter the expression of genes related to inflammation and stress response. There's actually one groundbreaking study in 2013 that found that after an intensive day of mindfulness practice, meditators had down-regulated genes involved in inflammation, like the COX2 gene, and recover faster from a stressful event at a molecular level. So that's mind over biology in action.
Yeah, one of my favorite points about meditation is something that I struggled with for decades. You hear about slowing your breathing down, that's an important part of meditation. And I thought I had done that forever, and I just wasn't getting anywhere. And so maybe it didn't work really. Maybe it didn't work for me. And then I've shared this several times. A group that makes a feedback device. It's called Respirate. And this is not an ad for them, but they did ask me to do an ad, and I did, or they asked me to try it. I tried it, and it had a huge impact. And what I found was, if you go back and you look at the evidence behind it, it was really clear. Both the American Heart Association and the U.S. Federal Drug Administration FDA had approved this. And I'm looking at it and I'm going, gosh, these guys, why would they do that? Where was the evidence? And so I started digging deeper in terms of the evidence. It made it really clear. If you slow your breath rate, not from your typical 15 to 20 down to 12, if you cut that breath rate in half to more like 8 to 10, it has an impact. It actually stimulates your vagus nerve, that the opposite of fight or flight, that vagus nerve that's more rest and digest, slow our body down. You actually have an impact on that nerve, and then that nerve helps make the metabolic changes that we're talking about. So again, there's real science behind this. There's real evidence, and plenty of groups have looked at it. For those of us who struggled for 20 years about trying to slow our breathing down and thinking it didn't work, maybe we didn't do it that well. Maybe we didn't slow it down enough. That's clearly what I found out. Another thing that you need to do with breathing and meditation is slow down that exhale compared to the inhale. Both of these things stimulate the vagus nerve, and they also increase CO2 levels, which expands the arteries in our brains and, as I said, stimulate the vagus nerve. So there's a lot more to slowing your breathing, to meditation, to things that, folks in India have known about for 4,000 years. It was ignored in the West and until recently, and then now there's a lot of again significant tons of research, tons of evidence supporting things like meditation.
Absolutely. And that you were referring to exhaling longer than you're inhaling. It's so powerful, and usually in practice when we're working with patients, and this is one of the things that we always recommend, engaging your parasympathetic nervous system. And this 4-7-8 breathing technique, it's great for that because it helps you exhale longer than you are inhaling, and also concentrating in the counting, so that it also helps your mind to stop wandering around, which is one of the biggest challenges of meditation or breathing exercises, right? And a part of our habit and identity work has to be teaching the nervous system that it's safe, and that it's safe to change, safe to relax, safe to even enjoy these new habits. So we want to regularly engage the parasympathetic nervous system, which is our rest and digest side, to counterbalance all that fight or flight. So simple techniques like deep breathing, for instance, just taking 5 to 10 slow, deep belly breaths, that can activate the vagus nerve and shift you into a calmer state. And there is ample evidence that slow breathing, as you were mentioning, increases that vagal tone and HRV, which is going to be a marker of parasympathetic nervous activity. So even a single session of deep breathing can significantly reduce anxiety by boosting that vagal response. Some other ways of engaging with parasympathetic nervous system is strategies or interventions like grounding, red light therapy, even basic things as having a consistent sleep pattern and light exposure, synchronizing your circadian rhythm to the natural light. It's very helpful to help your cortisol regulate it and not spiking up in the middle of the night, for example, and help your body tuning into a natural rhythm of calmness, using your cortisol when you need it and dropping it when you don't.
Speaking of, just a quick side, speaking of sleep and the importance of sleep, that respirate device, it was a biofeedback for slowing my breathing and slowing that exhale phase. I remember it just put me right to sleep, and I've always had challenges with sleep. And I remember talking to the guys that made it and said, you sell this for blood pressure. To me, it's, well, why do you not talk about sleep? Because it's so important. And it was interesting, the comments they gave us. They said, yep, the folks just don't value sleep. And that's one of the things that you and I deal with and the rest of our team in terms of people just not understanding the importance of sleep. But let's get back to more of a 50,000 foot level. All of these tactics that we've talked about are strategies, tactics, more on the ground level work. But let's get back up to 50,000 feet. So as we discussed, identity is not just a mental issue. It is a metabolic issue, and it does drive our metabolic health. So we have to be able to get into our identity and maybe just rewire it sometimes in order to get where we want to be. Now, can you tell us a little bit more about, and I'm going to give you a personal kudo here. We're working to get our coaches on the channel so people begin to see and understand the value and the skill set that our coaches have. A lot of them are nervous about appearing in front of so many people, public speaking. You've been very good about being able to do that. So I have to tell you, I think a lot of that has to do with you rewiring your own identity, you developing your own confidence level, your ability to do public speaking. Wanted to applaud you for that. And I wanted to ask, how do you rewire an identity?
Thank you very much, Doctor. And you're totally right. I'm not going to lie. I was nervous at first, but it did took a lot of rewiring and switching into this new identity that now I appear in YouTube. So that's great. And I hope that at this point we have convinced everyone, or at least I hope so, that identity shift is key to lasting change. So how you actually do this is basically going to be a rehearsal, okay? Literally a retraining or rewiring. One of the strategies that I like to use is an identity statement. That's going to be the starting point. So you can think of it as a personal mantra or a declaration that defines your new self. So the formula that I recommend is I am someone who, and you put your new identity statement, because I value whatever you value and what brings emotional energy to this new identity. For example, I am someone who moves my body every day because I value having energy and being there for my family. So that's going to have a more emotional impact than just saying, I move every day because my doctor tells me that I need to do it. That feels like a to-do list. And usually we feel a lot of resistance towards to-do lists. So
let me interrupt just a second, if you don't mind. I think that's such a key issue in terms of motivation. Another key topic of mine, again, it hasn't been very popular with our viewers, but it's what motivates you and how do you motivate yourself? We've done several videos on that issue. And one of the key components, and again, there's science there. You look at longevity, it's very much associated with longevity. They've done a couple of studies where they looked at longevity among seniors here in the States and other places. They looked at one of the more interesting studies in this space it was called the Holocaust Survivor Study. It was Jews that had been in the concentration camps, and they noticed that some of them survived much, much longer. And the assumption was, oh, well, they must have had good genetics, but maybe they were just lucky. That was not really so much the case. A lot of these people had more, the groups, the comparison groups, the longer living survivors had more diabetes. They had more cancers. They had more severe health problems. But yet, like that what is it, the ever-ready battery. They took that licking and kept on ticking. And what they began to see as they interviewed these folks was time and time again, their motivation was different. It's like that book, Man in Search of Meaning or Man's Search of Meaning. These people had values. There was something that they valued that was bigger than them. So instead of saying, I'm going to exercise because my doctor told me, that's saying I value myself and I value what the doctor says, which is not such a big deal. But when you say, as you said, look, I want to be around for my family. I want to see my grandkids. I want to be able to support my family financially. Or I just, I enjoy the work that I do, and the work that I do is helping people. All of those things are much bigger motivators than I'm just wanting to take care of myself, or especially some quote expert like a doctor told me to. Motivation is critical here.
That's
interrupt.
No, that's exactly right. And when you're tied to your value or your purpose, as you mentioned, whether that's your family, vitality, this phrasing gives your brain a reason to resonate emotionally. So you're affirming both behavior and the deeply held value it serves. So another thing that we can think about, or another example could be, I am someone who chooses fresh whole foods because I value respecting my body and enjoying a long, healthy life. So when you state it this way, you're essentially saying, this is who I am now. And it's like planting a flag in new territory. Now, once you have that identity statement, you want to reinforce it from all angles. Okay. And there are different tools or techniques that you can use to install that identity. One of them, and is one of the most important from my perspective, is mental rehearsal. We talked about this and how potent it is. And set aside a few minutes each day. Let's say 5 minutes per day to visualize yourself living that identity. You can see it in detail and crucially feel the emotions of it. If your identity is someone who moves daily, picture yourself on a walk or at the gym feeling proud, okay? When we have, and this is tied to Dr. Joe Dispenza talks a lot about this. When you have a strong or clear goal linked to an intense emotion, that's going to help change or make a shift in your identity and your personal reality. So if you're feeling proud, if you're feeling strong and happy while you're at the gym, maybe at the beginning that might feel a little bit off because you're shifting into this new identity, right? But the more you practice, and that's why it's called mental rehearsal, the more you practice, the better it's going to be, or the easier it's going to be for your body to start literally projecting that new reality. So when you see a gym, or when you put on your gym clothes, that's going to send a signal to your body and to your mind, like, hey, I'm familiar to this, and why I have been trained is that I enjoy this. So that your mind starts creating a new biological response to your new experience. So experience it's in your mind. And as we already know, our mind cannot difference between what's real and what's fiction. So being able to rehearse these feelings in your mind constantly, that's literally rehearsing these neural pathways and training your body. So you can start to treat this identity familiar, and it's true because you're telling your brain that it's your new reality. So one of the techniques that I like the most is mental rehearsal. Another thing that you can also complement with that is surrounding yourself with environmental cues that are going to echo to your new identity. So our environment often triggers our habits automatically. So make sure that your environment reflects the person that you want to be. If you're someone who moves daily, keep your sneakers by the door or your yoga mat in plain sight. If you're someone who chooses organic foods, arrange your kitchen to make fruits and vegetables visible and hide or throw away any kind of junk food. So making the cues of good habits obvious are and the cues of bad habits invisible. That's what will help us embody this new identity that we want.
So, number one, in terms of building habits, we got to have the right identity. And in terms of building the right identity, first of all, we need the right motivation. And some expert or some doctor telling us is just not adequate motivation for most of us. We want to have motivation of something that's bigger than us and bigger than our day-to-day whims. Something like our life, our family, bigger issues. Then we want to do mental rehearsal. We want to make sure that we go back again and again to the why we're doing something. Set up environmental anchors. And, when you say this about rewiring your kitchen, it reminds me of the first part of the book, Always Hungry by David Ludwig. He's an endocrinologist that runs the program, the obesity management program at Harvard. He wrote a book with his wife. The last half of the book, he talked about the science of prediabetes, diabetes, metabolic disease, which he was saying makes you always hungry. And eating carbs and getting on that that blood sugar roller coaster is why you're getting always hungry. He's saying, get off the carbs. And the first part of the book was written with his wife because she's helping say, okay, you know what? Get the cereal out of the cabinets. Get the breads out of the cabinets. Get the junk food, the sweetened stuff, the highly processed, high glycemic carbs. Just get them out of the kitchen. A big, big environmental anchor for having the right lifestyle, the right habits. Now, one of the last things you talk about is reframing patterns. What do you mean by that?
So when we're reframing a pattern, let's say that you catch yourself telling or repeating this internal narrative. We can follow a catch, pause, and reframe loop. Okay, this is a cognitive tool for moments when your old identity starts to pop up. So the step number one, it's going to be catch that negative thought or label. See, I'm still a failure, or I'm craving sugar, or I'm weak. So you're going to pause right there. You're going to take a deep breath and literally pause the action that you're about to take, like reaching for a candy or skipping the workout. And then you're going to reframe. Okay, you can gently replace that thought with your new identity statement. And that's why it's so important to have these mantras or identity statements clear. So whenever you caught yourself falling into old patterns, you're able to replace this with an identity statement or something that it's aligned with. Okay, so let's say they put the ice cream pot in front of you and you say, well, I'm a sugar addict. I cannot resist this. It doesn't need to end there. You can catch it, pause, take a deep breath, and reframe. I'm someone who takes care for my body, and this is not who I am anymore. And that's it. No self-judgment, but almost with this curiosity and self-coaching. Okay. Over time, this thought substitution becomes automatic. And it's like training your inner dialogue to speak with more alignment with your new identity. So catch, pause, and reframe is the best way to start rewiring, because it won't happen overnight. And that's the truth. We're humans. We might fall off the wagon in that aspect. But having the right tools, like this approach, can help you be more gentle with yourself. Don't judge yourself, because that's going to create more cortisol, and we start falling into the same loop, and being able to train your inner dialogue and narrative.
Now, again, we're talking about neural pathways, and these same neural pathways that take us into addictive behavior or disease, we're just rewiring them to make us healthy, right?
That's right. And neuroscience shows that neurons that fire together wire together. And with these practices, you're forcing the good neurons to fire together frequently. And eventually, you have rewired your brain, and by extension, your identity.
So speaking of that, I'd like to get into that section of the talk where we talk a little bit more about chronic stress, how that can impact this, how we can get over that and get into good change. But I have to mention something. You mentioned a creator, a content creator, a fellow named Joe Dispenza. I know we'll get a lot of comments about that. A lot of Dr. Dispenza's stuff is not that well, or at least let me just say this. I don't agree with everything he says, but like most folks, there are very few people that I agree with everything they say. When folks start talking about the quality of the data, what the quality of the evidence, what's supported and what isn't. But like most folks, I've read his stuff, and he does say some things that are very important and are backed. So just like all of us, you have to dig deeper. You have to check the facts. You have to look at the evidence. Let's go back and talk for a minute about you get chronic stress on one side. Is that protecting our health, or is it creating problems? Is it blocking change? What do we do with that?
That's exactly right. And chronic stress can actually block change, even positive change, because the body in survival mode resists anything that's new or uncertain. And this is where concepts like the polyvagal theory come in. And that's where you're in sympathetic fight or flight state. Your body's priority is to protect, not to learn or adapt. And even if your logical mind says eating salads is good, your nervous system, if it's under stress, it might flag it as one more stressor. And that's going to drive you back to comfort food or for something quick, Susie.
So, for example, if I decided I don't have enough control over sugar in my life, and I wanted to do absolutely no sugar, no ice cream ever, then, but I really didn't believe it, I'd start creating a chronic stress mechanism, because I'd be trying to accomplish something that I really don't believe is necessary.
That's right. And not only that it's not necessary, but your embodied identity, it's still going to crave that sugar or that ice cream, let's say. And that's the fact that you cannot have it, even though you want it. And subconsciously, emotionally, you need that sugar. That's going to create a stress response. And that stress response, it's going to lead you to this stress loop where you feel emotionally tied to food, and then you start doing emotional eating. And then there's the guilt, there's the frustration, more cortisol, and that's going to make it way more difficult to embody the I don't eat ice cream or I don't eat junk food anymore, because you are just restricting yourself, and restriction creates friction. And that's usually one of the main blockages for any type of change.
So we're getting to the end of my time frame here. I'm going to need to wrap it up. But in order to do that, let's just, if we could, go back and just run through some things like understanding the importance of identity, maybe journaling in that space, breath-based calming, reprogramming our internal narrative, some of the things that we've talked about, just to make sure that we've covered our bases.
So summarizing all of the key tools and takeaways, first, we need to identify which is your current story, okay? Pinpoint the identity or story that has been holding you back. What do you call yourself when it comes to your habit struggle? And as you mentioned, journaling, write it down. Awareness is going to be your power. You cannot change what you have not identified yet. So once you see that narrative, you can decide if it's one you want to keep, and chances are it's not. So once you identify, you want to create a new identity statement. And that's going to be the formula of I'm someone who, because I value this. So find your value, find your why, okay? Make sure that it resonates deeply. And if health is your goal, maybe your value is family, because I want to be healthy for my kids, or freedom, because I want to feel energetic and free in my body. So say this statement every morning to yourself. It might feel odd at the beginning, but remember that you're literally rewiring neural circuits with each repetition. So this is going to be your new mantra. Then you want to do at least one small action or one vote for your identity daily, so you can keep rewiring. So you can identify just one small action that you can take each day that proves your new identity to yourself. Okay. And I emphasize small because it should be achievable on a daily basis, even on your worst days. So if your identity is I'm an active person, your small action might be do 5 to 10 minutes of stretching or doing exercise snacks during the day. Okay. And use calming rituals to prime for change. Remember that stress is going to be a block for change. So we need to tune in or activate our parasympathetic nervous system. And you can do this by incorporating short calming practice before you do a new habit. So, for instance, before you open the fridge or you do a menu plan, you can do 5 deep breaths, tune in with your body, and get into a calmer state. So that can help you interrupt old patterns, be aware of those, and tell your nervous system, we're choosing a different response. And it's safe to do so, because that's what we need to do, make the nervous system feel safe. And decide, another thing that I recommend is deciding ahead of time. If you sleep, as you mentioned at the beginning, you ate the cake. That's not a reason to beat yourself. So if you're gonna do or take an action that might not be as aligned with your new identity as it should, just decide ahead of time that you're gonna do that, the reason why you're gonna do that, and don't beat yourself, okay? You're gonna be practicing this catch, pause, and reframe, where you catch the negative self-talk, pause, take a breathe, and then reframe. Okay. And another thing that we have not mentioned, but it's something that I really recommend, is engaging support. This means that don't do this alone. Tell your partner, your family, your health coach, tell someone that can help you stay accountable. Okay. Just that accountability, it's going to cement your commitment. Because if you do it alone, there are going to be higher chances that you're going to not find it, even if it's tied to a good value or purpose, it might not be as strong as if you share it with someone. So it can be an identity buddy, someone else who is doing a similar change, or just find someone who can help you check in with you regularly, celebrate each other's wins, and encourage each other after any setbacks. But it's important that you are always feeling supported when you're achieving or working to rewire your brain to a new identity.
Oh, another way to help, I'm sure, is to make a commitment, make a public commitment, leave a comment on the show today and say, look, here's what I'm doing in terms of my own identity. Here are my next steps. Share this show with somebody else and let them know what you're doing, somebody that you're working with. So, and by the way, don't you have an identity workshop or a coaching session that we can offer folks?
Absolutely. We do have the emotional coaching as well.
So it's a good point. I mean, again, this is what we do in the practice. And, this is what I do. That's my part of what's bigger than me. I want to help save lives. I want to help people understand the evidence behind the science, the things that will help all of us get a longer and, most of all, a healthier life, so we can do with that life what we want to do, so we can fulfill our commitments, our desires to help our family, or those motivational points that are bigger than us. We, as you see from the discussion with Debbie today, we've got coaches that are very familiar with this process. Yes, on the channel, I focus mostly on science, but believe it or not, there's stuff that's bigger than science and just facts in terms of turning this around to a healthier me. So if you'd like to turn this around to a healthier me, I mean, you can call us at 859-721-1414, 859-721-1414, and get set up. Talk to Debbie, talk to our other coaches, talk to me, and get on your road to a better, healthier lifestyle and life, so you can get on the road to supporting your family or supporting others or doing that thing that really motivates you, that's bigger than you.